Picture this: you're at a fancy European dinner party in the 1600s. The host brings out the main course with a flourish, but instead of a roasted pig or peacock, it's ground-up human remains, and everyone starts eating. You don't learn this in history classes out there. For centuries, Europeans didn't just collect mummies, they ate them. Real ancient Egyptian mummies, ground up and served as medicine, baked into bread, and even featured at luxury banquets. This wasn't some twisted ritual or bizarre status symbol. Europeans genuinely believed munching on millennia-old corpses would help them somehow. During the Renaissance, ancient Egypt captured European imagination like nothing else. If you were anybody who wanted to be somebody, you needed Egyptian stuff in your collection. Statues, artifacts, and especially mummies. These weren't just seen as preserved bodies, they were status symbols, conversation pieces, and potential miracle cures. Merchants would display mummies in their shop windows like luxury items. Imagine walking down a street in London or Paris and seeing an ancient Egyptian corpse propped up next to fine silks and exotic spices. European nobility would host elaborate unwrapping parties where they'd invite their friends over to unwind a mummy. Kind of like a modern-day unboxing video, but way more morbid. They'd gather around, sip wine, and watch as layers of ancient wrappings were peeled away to reveal the preserved person inside. This wasn't some underground black market. This was mainstream European culture at its finest. Artists would use a paint color called mummy brown made from actual ground-up mummies. The obsession was so intense that entire social gatherings revolved around these ancient remains. What started as collecting curiosities was about to become something far more disturbing. Europeans had much bigger plans for these sacred artifacts. They were about to turn them into the hottest commodity in medieval medicine cabinets across the continent. So how exactly did someone wake up one day and think, you know what would make great medicine? Ground-up mummies. Well, it all started with a massive misunderstanding about bitumen, that black, tar-like natural substance. Ancient Arabic medical texts praised the healing properties of bitumen, which they called mumma. Here's the wild part: because Egyptian mummies were black and shiny, Europeans thought they were preserved with this magical healing bitumen. European doctors came up with this absolutely bonkers theory called sympathetic medicine. The basic idea: dead preserved tissue could somehow transfer its preservation powers to living tissue. In their minds, consuming mummy bits was like taking an immortality pill. The biggest names in European medicine were all about that mummy life. The personal physician of Francis I of France prescribed mummy powder. Medical textbooks from the 12th to the 18th century regularly included mummy preparations in their prescriptions. They were so common that you could walk into pretty much any European pharmacy and ask for prepared mummy like you'd ask for aspirin today. Want to know what they thought mummies could cure? Pretty much everything. Headaches, bruises, broken bones, nausea, epilepsy, plague, internal bleeding. They'd mix mummy powder into tinctures, pack it into pills, dissolve it in liquids, and even make plasters to put on wounds. When demand exploded, Egyptian tombs became the new gold mines. Teams of grave robbers would raid burial sites, sometimes bringing out dozens of mummies in a single night. They'd sell them to merchants who'd pack them onto ships bound for European ports like cattle. As demand kept growing, suppliers couldn't dig up mummies fast enough, so they got creative, making fresh mummies from recently deceased bodies. The mummy obsession reached its peak with something even more shocking: exclusive dinner parties where wealthy Europeans served mummy meat as the main course. High society gatherings in 1680s France featured carefully prepared flesh extracted from Egyptian remains, seasoned and presented like exotic delicacies. Guests would pass around plates of ancient human meat, washing it down with wine mixed with mummy powder, snacking on bread baked with ground mummy, and sweetening their drinks with mummy-infused sugar. It was like a macabre farm-to-table movement, except the farm was a tomb and the table was set with thousand-year-old human remains. But the aristocracy didn't stop there. They organized mummy painting parties where artists would create portraits using pigments made from ground corpses. These weren't considered shocking or taboo practices at the time. European nobility saw mummies as exotic commodities, not human remains. They'd casually discuss the best preparation methods like trading cooking tips. Some hosts would brag about their mummy's vintage, claiming it came from ancient pharaohs or priests. By the mid-1700s, some European doctors were prescribing specific cuts of mummy for different ailments: the head for headaches, the heart for cardiac issues, the feet for foot problems. So what finally made Europeans stop? First, tomb raiders started admitting most ancient Egyptian mummies were homemade fakes. Nothing kills a luxury market like discovering you've been eating recently deceased criminals instead of ancient pharaohs. Then came scientific thinking. Doctors actually started testing if medicines worked. The real death blow came from growing interest in Egyptian history. As scholars studied hieroglyphs, they realized these mummies were actual people with names, stories, and beliefs about the afterlife. By the late 1800s, eating mummies had gone from respected medicine to shameful practice that participants desperately concealed. The tragic part? By the time Europe developed this conscience, countless mummies had already been destroyed, an entire chunk of human history consumed because of a centuries-long medical misconception.